Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining me again to the YAM Podcast. I named it after I recorded the first podcast, so that's how my process is right now. But step by step, we're gonna go there. So, if you have not watched the previous video, I'm just gonna be yapping for about 20 minutes, unscripted, which is why I call it a podcast because it's unscripted and I don't know where we're ending. I just have a topic, I have an idea, and we're just gonna blah, 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 until we're at the end of the 20-minute section. I want to welcome you back to my set, to my little corner of the internet. As you can see, we actually have a little change on set. We have a piano. I really don't know how to play piano that well, but I'm learning. I know how to play guitar. Here we have my guitar, my baby. But yeah, I wanted to learn piano as well because during singing, the piano is a bit more clear. It's totally not what this podcast is about, but then you have a little insight of my life and what excites me, and this piano is my new excitement and a new addition to our little corner on this internet. Yes, this internet. So as you can tell by the title, because I'm gonna mention this book title, in our actual title, um, The Healing Wisdom of Africa by a marvelous writer called Malidoma Partice Somé. This is when I realized that I always say Salome when it's not true. It's Somé. I never stop yapping about this book, but I want to start somewhere else because this transition didn't feel natural for me. Last week we talked about cycles and quote unquote moon cycles, or in brackets. And then I was like, oh, there's so many ideas. And then they just kind of left me. And I kind of started questioning and I started kind of doubting. And I was like, what? Do I need to prepare better? Whatever. Because the thing is I've been wanting to talk about this book online for a long time now. And I talk to a lot of random people. Like, I think I mentioned this book at least once a week. And if there's a few weeks that I don't, then there's definitely a week where I mention it at least 3 times again to even the scale. Because this book is so marvelous and it was life-changing for me to read. One moment, I think I'm gonna burp. There we go. And I recommend a lot of people to read this book. This book, as you've noticed, and what I mentioned also in the last podcast, is I greet you in an Islamic way, and I was born into this faith. But I had struggles with the faith as a teenager, mainly when I was a teenager. And at the end of my teenage years, I became quote unquote spiritual. And I started diving a little bit deeper and going into the self-development cycle, which is what most of us, what most spiritual people like pulls them in the first place. It's like, okay, how do I actually regulate all of this craziness that is life? And it usually happens after the teens. I think that's when spirituality really starts to settle, and I marvel at people who have like stuck with a faith that they've been raised with and totally live in that. That was just not my privilege, but I had a different journey. And the journey doesn't start with the healing wisdom of Africa, but the journey, when we arrive at the healing wisdom of Africa, in my personal journey, is the moment that everything shifted. Because it actually led me back to Islam. And that's strange. And I'm not saying that I'm like, let's just go into the book. So Malidoma Partice Somé is a writer, and he has written another book before this one that I didn't read yet. The author of Water and the Spirit. He's from Burkina Faso, in West Africa, and I'm reading the back of the book right now, right? And his name Malidoma means be friends with the stranger. And when we enter this book, he explains um, like a little bit of his life story. So he grows up in a tribe. I don't remember what the place is called, but I know that his name, the tribe's name, they're called the Dagara people. That's what he mentions them as. Um, and yeah, and so they are centered in West Africa in Burkina Faso, and he grows up there, but then his father sells him to missionaries. Is that the right word? Mercenaries, the people who come to preach faith in other countries, right? That were usually part of a colonial enterprise, and we're the first. We're the first sort of. They would try to reel people into the Christian faith, for instance, or that's kind of how Christianity really did it. Like the other two monotheistic faiths, they didn't work like that. Obviously, they would have, like, for instance, what I learned so far is that Islam was mostly exchanged through trading. So people were already on the land because of trade, not because of colonization. There's a huge difference, to trade in an honorable manner, and then they kind of exchanged in that way. This is my knowledge right now, right? Like, obviously there's much more to learn, and history is always written by history has a filter. Let me just say that, okay? History has a filter, and we don't need to take everything at face value the way we read it. But this book, so he's sold away by his father to this place, and I'm not gonna say the words again because what if I'm wrong? And so he goes to like this boarding school. Once again, we have to talk about the colonial enterprise, about how they would steal, quote unquote, steal these kids, or were being sold away apparently. And then they would learn English, and they weren't allowed to speak their native tongue. They would learn the Christian way of living, and they weren't allowed to practice their indigenous spiritual practices, all of these things, right? So this is where he has his formative years, actually. So he has time with his people. Then and I don't remember the age, I'm sorry about that, because it's been a while since I've read it. And I only had a week to prepare, and I'm reading other stuff, so I couldn't read all of it again. But I'm telling you what I remember, and I'm telling you that this book's legendary, okay? So he goes to the school, and he hates it there. And I think around the age of 15, 16, 17, he manages to I think you're going to hear a baby cry. That's from my neighbors. I live in a dense neighborhood. It happens. Anyway, so he's able to run away, and he runs all the way back to his village. And this is where the book actually starts. So we get a little bit of his backstory, and then we enter the village, and we enter the spiritual practices of the village. Sorry, no plurality there, because we're in his specific village. And what he also explains is that he's actually late. He boys, men, in their culture, in their practice, they go through, quote unquote, what is called an initiation around 11, 12 years old. He's about 3 to 4, maybe 5 years late at this point. But to be able to be a part of the community, he has to do the initiation. And so he talks, the beginning of the book is really his like struggle with like having to do that at a later age in life, and the magical, marvelous things that happen, and his articulation of like, I am aware that some people might associate these experiences that I've had with other things, but I know what I lived, and that internal knowledge, that complete devotion to understanding one's own experience, and like still being aware of all the other things that could have been a possibility, that is the rational way to explain things. He devotes his words and his book to the spiritual essence of what life is, specifically for the Dagara people, but this book is a gift to all of us, and this is where he ends the book. He ends the book with explaining. So, and then I will go into the maybe the middle part a little bit, but he ends the book with, I know that you cannot copy paste this. And you cannot copy paste this not because of the word cultural appropriation never gets mentioned in this book, but obviously is in context with stuff like this. He says, but it's not about that for him. What he says is, I know you cannot copy this because the way that they go about their ceremonies and their initiations and their way of life is not something that it just isn't possible in Western culture because of how Western culture operates. Like, they go on hunting journeys and the whole community goes on a hunting journey together. Like, how are you going to do that in Amsterdam? Like, it's just not possible. You know what I mean? So he's aware of that, and he articulates that at the end of the book. And I think that's so great that he did that. And it was like, it gave me peace at the end, and it gave me understanding, and it gave me also a permission slip, because he says, you cannot copy this because of, you read it all, you know you cannot copy this, but take from it what you can and implement it and let it influence your practice and the way you handle yourself in the Western culture. So the book is a little bit addressed to Western people in a way, because obviously a book is for anyone who's curious, but he addresses us, the Westerner, and I am bicultural, but I've born and raised in the Netherlands, so I'm a Westerner. Whether I like it or not, it's just the truth. And he says, just let it influence you and do what you can with it, because now you have a knowledge and you have a deeper understanding of what it means to be like how we work, the Dagara people, how close our relationship is to nature, how close our relationship is to the other side, the validation of the spiritual realm, and now work with it. Now that you have this knowledge, let it influence you, right? Because we are changed every time you're exposed to something new. And it's so marvelous, and it's the greatest gift of life, is that we can continue to evolve, continue to change. I said the other day to a friend, even if you are born of the same, like if you are a flower, for instance, and you've blossomed in spring or in summer, and then you die because that's the season, that's the way life works, that's the way the natural realm operates, the material realm operates. And then your seeds, obviously, and with your flower and your whole thing, just kind of like falls back into the soil and is drowned, and all of these, like that process that happens in winter, and then it grows again. So it's the same seed, but it's not the same flower. It can never be the same flower. And I'm not a biologist to explain that, but you know what I mean, right? And that's actually a gift in this life. We will never be the same spring. So today is I don't remember the date. Today is the 27th of March, but this is launching on the 6th of April. But last year, who I was on the 6th of April is not the same person I am today. This is these cycles that we're coming back to again, right? Because I'm obsessed with them. Yeah, so I love that he did that at the end of the book, and he said, you know what, please let it influence you and do something with it. So, and maybe I'm gonna not make a lot of friends by saying this, but this is why I also don't feel like learning from this book and implementing these practices is cultural appropriation, because you actually got an indigenous scholar explaining how it works and then saying, let it influence you, right? Which is a slight permission slip. And that doesn't mean that we now need to negate our responsibility towards West African people and making sure that the preservation of the Dagara people, we need to make sure that they can continue their life, right? That's a part of cultural appreciation and of cultural admiration. It's like understanding, okay, this tribe has influenced me. This tribe has educated me, and now I must do what reverence means and what respect means, and it means to um, give credit where credit is due. So every time I talk about something that has integrated into my system, and this person is actually listening to me, I explain where the knowledge is from, and how this book has marvelously influenced me, because that is appreciation, right? That is reverence. That is understanding that I would not be who I am if it wasn't for Malidoma and the Dagara people, and the preservation that they were able to maintain. So I could actually learn from this, and that's my greatest wish in this life, is that we continue to do that for communities, indigenous communities, people that are not operating within the capitalistic system, because they are the living proof that it is possible to live in a different type of system. Because and I know that this ain't the way, and this is not sustainable. And so it's learning from indigenous cultures how that works, right? Because they have a more sustainable way of living. I will not go through the whole entire book, because as you can see, we're about 3 minutes left, but a little bit. So we might go a little bit over time here, but they have it's not called a medicine wheel, but it is their an elemental wheel, and for every element they have different spiritual collective practices, so personal practices and spiritual practices. And so he talks about water, he talks about fire, he talks about earth, he talks about minerals, and he talks about another one. They have 5, and I don't remember the 5th one, so sorry about that. Oh my god, I want to share about all of these different rituals that they have, and I don't remember all of them, but let me give you a few. So let's talk about Malidoma's name and how the Dagara people name their children. So the medicine man, the medicine person, the shaman of the tribe, I think he has a different name for it. My apologies. They sit with the pregnant woman when she's pregnant, and I don't know if he mentions which trimester she's in when they do that, but then they go in communion and they try to connect to the spirit of the child, the spirit of the child that's going to manifest in the body that the womb is creating in that moment. And they ask the child, what is your purpose? What are you doing here? What are you coming to do? What? And I actually feel like I need to tell the pre-story, but basically, the child then explains what its purpose is, and the community decides to name the child after that. So Malidoma's purpose, one of his embodiments, one of the things that he agreed with the council of ancestors before he integrated and incarnated into this material world, was I need to be friends with strangers. Why? Because there's huge benefits. There's struggles, there will be struggles, but there are also huge benefits to befriending strangers. And that's why he was named Malidoma, because that's his life purpose. And so every time this consciousness, this creature that is human, is called to their attention by someone else, that is all, right? Long story, but this call to attention by someone else is called to attention with the sound of their purpose. So every time we talk about Malidoma, he's reminded of his purpose in this world. Isn't that marvelous? I sobbed. I sobbed when I read it. Yeah, and I'm not done talking about this. So what I will do is I will actually continue to record, and then this will be the next episode as well, because this book is yay. So thank you for watching. See you next week to continue with this specific episode and this topic. Mwah. Bye.